Love it.
All right. How's it going, everybody? I am super excited to have on one of my best friends, a guy that I just truly respect, truly love. He is my go-to solar guy. Mike, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Dude, thanks for having me, man. I very much appreciate it. So,
We've been getting a lot of people, kind of asking about solar, and you are the solar guy. So we're super excited to have you on. Just kind of ask some questions for people out there that are thinking about getting solar. So super appreciate your time. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
heck yeah, man. Well, dude, my name is Michael, as you can see based off this up above me right here. But yeah, from San Diego. I went to high school with this guy over here. So I've known him since we were young boys. And, but got into, my dad was an electrician. Like my first encounter with solar was when I was like in middle school. My dad like installed our like ground mount system at our house in El Cajon. So that was like the first experience and touch I ever had on it. And then about 3 years ago, I kind of fell into the industry. It was kind of during the whole COVID transition thing. I was looking kind of for a new career change and yeah, fell into this and loved it. Just absolutely loved kind of what the industry is all about. It's all about empowerment, creating your own power, and it's just financially makes sense. So yeah, big fan.
Being a homeowner, I mean, we probably get solar guys that come out, to our front door every other day. And I, working with you and working with clients together, I think people are just inclined to work with you because you really care, right? And you're really trying to give them different options. You're not going to push someone to buy something that they don't want. So I really appreciate that about you and your approach. Let's get right into it if it's okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Just kind of tell us, just very layman's terms, simply put, like, how does it work?
Yeah. So how solar works is pretty simple. So you have the solar panel, you have it on the roof of your house. So typically, so what happens is it takes the sunlight that like hits the solar cells and it converts that to DC power. So from there, it runs through the conduit and goes to the inverter. And it has to go through an inverter because homes run on AC power, which think of DC as like a one-way street and AC as a two-way street. You need two-way street like for the power in your house, and the panel itself is just creating DC power.
Mm-hmm.
So the sunlight hits the solar cell, converts it into DC power, goes through the inverter, converts it into AC power, and then feeds it into your main panel, which feeds into your house and gives you, the AC that we love on days like this, and the light bulbs, the switch and whatnot, like all of that is what it feeds into. So
the fact that you could explain that to me, I appreciate, because I understood that. So
yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think a lot of people forget this, Mike, is when the grid, that just because you have solar panels doesn't mean your electricity is going to be on, right? It still feeds in through SDGE.
Correct.
And we'll touch on that too, actually. Let me wait to get that.
Yeah.
What would benefit from solar, Mike? I know there's some tax benefits out there that people aren't so, aware of, but, who really benefits from getting solar?
Yeah. Homeowners are huge, like, benefactors of this because the tax credit is designed for people to install solar on their primary residence. So if you own a home and you don't have solar on your home, you can get the tax benefit of installing it, which is recently just got increased from 26% to 30% and then extended out for another like 10 plus years. So huge, like, great news for anybody who's thinking or looking forward to going solar.
That's really good news. And I know you're not a CPA, but just looking at specific numbers, let's say that I was buying solar panels, simple math, for 10,000. If I had a 30% credit, does that get offset from the 10,000, or is it money that I can use to credit my income based on where I'm at, whatever career I'm in?
So great question. So how it works in solar is it's all the $10,000 price is the money that's going to come out of pocket. And then how that 30% is offset, that $3,000 is going to come out of your tax liability. So if you're a W-2 employee, you're paying taxes throughout the year. So that money is either come back to you, or if you're independent contractor or you have to, file your own, then you can use that $3,000 towards your tax liability.
That's great. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you want to touch on, or can I go to the next one?
No, it's who could benefit from solar is anybody, especially in Southern California. If you live in Southern California, it is beneficial to go solar regardless of your circumstances because of how high of a rate that we pay.
One of the highest in the nation.
The highest in the nation.
The highest, yeah.
We pay. Yeah. So I sell everywhere from I sell throughout the nation, but the majority of the business that I do is in Southern California. Southern California, we pay about on average 40 cents a kilowatt hour, whereas the rest of the nation is anywhere between 12 and 15 cents.
Wow.
So, and it's crazy. It's crazy how much more we pay here. So going solar, it just makes so much sense here.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long typically, Mike, do the solar panels last for, and how frequently should people clean them?
Great question. Typically, most panels come with a 25-year warranty. So you're going to see a very common lifespan of 25, 30, 35 years.
That's great.
And these things are designed to be outside. So they're tough. They're meant to be outside. They're meant to be in the weather. So it's these things are designed with the idea that this is going to be in Mother Nature and subject to the elements. So they're pretty strong. And then as far as cleaning them goes, I tell people try and clean them once a year, maybe twice a year if you want. It's not going to make the biggest difference. If you start to get a good amount of caked on dust over the top of them, or if you got birds that are you pooping all over them and doing all that kind of stuff, then yeah, you're going to want to clean that stuff off, but it's not going to keep them from producing, is basically what I try to tell people.
Again, this may be a question you may or may not know. Are there apps, Mike, that they can track to see how efficient their specific solar panels are doing? Is that dependent on a company, or
totally. So Enphase and Solar Edge are kind of the primary top two inverter companies. And so what they have is they essentially have a program that when you go solar, you have your system that you can log into and monitor to see how is it doing. And you can look to see it its production levels. You can see if, especially now with these, there's microinverters and string inverters. Microinverters can tell you details about each and every single one of the panels, and what's happening on each one. Whereas the string inverter kind of collects the whole thing. It monitors the whole system in general. But these companies basically have an app that you can log into and check to see how's my system doing, what's happening. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Do you have a specific example recently? Have you closed any recent clients on how you were able to, save someone money when they didn't have solar before?
Yeah, totally. Actually, this morning, I just closed on a guy up in Calamasa, California. So he was with SoCal Edison, but he was paying on average, about $175 a month. So he decided to go with a solar loan and finance it. And after that whole process, he is now going to be paying a fixed rate of $72 a month. So we saved him a little bit over $100 a month in that sense. And that's what is such a beautiful part about this product is he decided to go to the financing route. So you're going to pay a little bit more. You're going to pay a little bit more of a premium on your panels to finance, but there's still so much savings to be had. And, I get the question all the time of people okay, should I finance this? Should I, buy this cash? Should I do that? And it's whatever makes the most sense for you financially is the way that you should go about it. I know that's kind of a vague answer.
But,
in this case for him,
but you'll know enough, and you got some other professionals that can take a look and see maybe this would be the better route for you.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
So this is not a political, well, it is a political opinion, but Governor Newsom is crazy with some of the politics he has going on. So, come later down the road in 2035, he's putting a proposal out there to stop, any manufacturing, any creating of motor vehicles, right? So after 2035, our future kids will only be able to allow to drive an electric car. I guess, what does the future look like for solar? Is the grid, can it sustain all these people with getting solar? Does that affect it? What do you think the future is for solar 5-10 years from now?
Yeah, I think from an industry standpoint, I think like this solar industry is looking great. From like just society infrastructurally as a whole perspective, I think that I love that they're trying to be progressive and like move things forward, but I really think that we shouldn't try to shoot ourselves in the foot too quick here. Like, I love that we're moving that direction. But it is hard because what's happening with SDG&E, and everybody wants to make SDG&E the enemy in this, like in San Diego, but it's like, I get where they're coming from in one perspective, that with all these people going solar, they have all these people who are no longer paying into, the cost of doing business on the grid. Like, all of a sudden they just went from having all these different revenues to now we have zero revenues, like, from these people, but yet they're still have the benefit of kind of being hooked up to us. Like, and we're kind of their battery backup system in a way. So
Interesting. Yeah.
So what's the push pull? And that's what the whole like net metering thing is. I'm not sure if you've heard that, but that's the whole agreement with utility companies and going solar. And it's like, I understand where the utilities companies are coming from. They want, they have declining revenues with all these people going solar, but then they have, continued grid costs. So they have rising costs or not rising costs, but let's just say steady costs.
Their profit margin is definitely being eaten into.
Their profit margins are squeezing, shrinking. And it's like, okay, well, how do we make this a win-win for the utility company and for us? And that's where, batteries are coming into. That's where everybody's trying to talk about batteries. How do we make this work to where, then
we're going to be in SDG&E is in really big trouble, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Because I think that's what the future is. Like, the future is if we have everybody doing these, because you think about it, like, we're having some of like the first generation, like, solar panels being like torn out now and the new ones being put in. And these first generation, like, solar panels, like, each one of those panels were about 75 watts. Like, they're like right around 100 watts. The panels now, like, are typically right around the 400 watt mark. So these things have multiplied in their capacity in like what they can do.
Amazing.
And so, there's just like, you put that in there, and then you have like these battery backup systems, and essentially you could have people just like they don't need quite the footprint that they used to have, like with solar panels now. And then you have a battery system, and it's like, essentially people could become self-sustaining and like don't even necessarily need the grid anymore. Will it ever get to that? I don't know.
Mike, this is such good insight. Good insight. We, as a homeowner, my first thought is like, oh, screw SDG&E, right?
Right.
But they're a business too, right? And it is interesting how it's operating and what's kind of the future for that. Mm-hmm. Any final thoughts on that? What you said was really helpful. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah. I just think that like that's where this whole net metering thing, like if it ever comes down to any sort of like vote, I just encourage like homeowners to like look at this from both perspectives. Like, I understand like SDG&E is going to try, these utility companies are going to try to knock solar as much as they can, the value of it, but try and see it from both perspectives. Like, I don't get anything from SDG&E, so I'm not pro, utility company here, but it's like they are doing you a service by giving you accessibility to power. So
huge.
Like, that in and of itself is huge. So if we can figure out a way to make continue solar to be super beneficial, but then also it still work with our current grid system, we got to figure that out, especially since we're becoming so reliant upon energy, like electricity now with the, this push towards EV cars, just the amount of technology in homes. This is something definitely to keep it on the forefront of your mind. Like as a homeowner, as somebody who's going to, be paying, you're going to be paying, down the road, taxes and different things with infrastructure wise. Like, let's make this as beneficial for both parties as possible. Let's figure out a way to work together. So
it's so funny. You're really looking at the big picture, right? And it's our job as, being in sales with our specific industries that we really give the clients the big picture, because, as like a typical homeowner, month to month is like, that's my bill, right? But when you look at what you could be saving over like a 5 or a 10-year span, really puts things in perspective. So I really appreciate that kind of futuristic outlook. You mentioned a little bit about solar power batteries. I mean, do you think it's a good investment right now? What's your take right now?
Right now,
On batteries?
I tell people to wait if they can, especially now that they've increased the investment tax credit to 30% and extended it out for a couple of years. The warranties on these batteries are only about 10 years. So
quick question on that, Mikey. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
The tax credit, is that from the solar company? Is that from the government? Where does that tax credit come?
Yeah, great question. That's from the federal government.
Okay.
Yeah, that's from so that all has to do with your taxes and the government and them trying to, up our production of green energy. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What I was saying, I tell homeowners to wait a couple of years if they can. If it's a dire need, if it's something where they're experiencing blackouts often and they need, energy and need power, then I would say, go for it. If this is something you're experiencing all the time, get it. It makes sense for you. Or if you're off grid, or if you're in a situation where, sometimes we lose power for a couple of days at a time, like get a battery. But if you're just your everyday person living in, the city, you can get you can get a battery backup, and you can make it work as far as penciling it. But I just tell people it's not worth the hassle right now, because if in 10 years that thing does go down, like that's it. Like you got a 10-year warranty. That's all you got. So yeah.
I super appreciate that perspective. It was funny. So last week, East County fell off the grid. I mean, lost AC. And, I had someone that actually had solar and was confused, like, hey, I have solar. Why did my electricity, why did my internet, all that go down? But it's fed through the grid, right? So it is really interesting, with that. So thanks for your opinion on that. On the just the different type of options. So, not everyone has, 10, 15, 20, $30,000 cash. We're getting the magic mic in the background. I love it. All good. If people don't have that cash, can you kind of tell us about the power purchase agreement, leasing, I guess how that transfers over? Because, at the end of the day is like, we want the benefit of the electric, but when I go to sell that home, Michael, is it going to be a good option for another buyer that's going to be buying my home? Can you just roughly touch the edges on the PPA, leases, and financing, different options?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I get this question a lot. As far as the major differences between all these is it really has to deal with where is this tax credit going. So if it's a PPA, it's not going to the homeowner. If it's leasing, it's not going to the homeowner. If it's financing, it's going to the homeowner. If it's a cash to the homeowner. So those are the biggest differences. So the PPA, basically what happens is, in a PPA is somebody becomes like, say I get a system, a power purchase agreement is essentially, okay, this company owns my solar panels on my roof and they're producing power for me and I am buying that electricity from them.
Okay, but they're still going the grid on the SDG&E, right? So they're still borrowing the electricity from SDG&E still. It's not like a battery.
So how it's working is so how it works, like during the day, your solar panels, when they're making power, it's going right into your home unless your home isn't drawing it and isn't using it for whatever. So if your home isn't using it, then it's pumping back into the grid, and then the grid is like the net metering. That's what net metering is all about. They're basically keeping score of, okay, yeah, you just produced a kilowatt hour, you get a 15-cent credit for that. Okay, you just produced another one, you get another 15-cent credit for that. But then at nighttime, when obviously there's no light, there's no power being produced by these panels, you're having to pull from the grid. So you're buying essentially that power back that you
got it, Mike. Great. Okay.
Yeah. So that's why this whole net metering agreement thing is where there's a lot of back and forth of, okay, how do we do this? Because, those hours of, 6, 7, 8, 9, when people are home from work and usage spikes, but then the sun is going down, so solar isn't producing as much power as it was during the day. You're all of a sudden going to have a huge spike in demand, and that's where the whole infrastructure thing is like, do we have enough grid power to, support this sort of thing? Do we have enough energy to support this? But essentially, yeah, with a PPA, you're just buying the power off of the company. Leasing, it's the same type of thing where it is, okay, I don't own these panels. So these panels are completely owned by the solar company. But they're going to produce then that solar company's responsibility to upkeep and maintain and make sure this whole thing is operating how it's supposed to be operating. And I still operate with SDG&E on my own, but I have a fixed payment that I make to the solar company to make sure that this system on top of my roof is going to take care of my power needs. And then there's financing, which is just, I'm the sole owner of this, of this solar system. And then basically you're just making payments on it towards ownership, which I personally think is the best way to go.
Yeah.
So
sorry. You're doing a great job explaining all this, Mike. Really appreciate it. And really simple, the biggest difference between leasing and a power purchase agreement, when you're leasing, you're still paying the company that owns the solar panels, right? Mm-hmm. Is there a huge difference between a PPA and a lease? Is it just more of the transferability is the biggest difference, or what do you find is the biggest difference?
I would say the transferability is messy for sure. Like
on both
of these. Like,
okay, good to know.
On PPAs and leasing, like if you're a homeowner and you get into a leasing agreement and then you get into a PPA agreement and then you go to sell your home, that person is now getting into that. Like you're signing up for the next 25 years for whoever lives in that home. So you're going to run into some like issues, like with, different.
Which I can say for the most part on the lending side, we don't really see that being an issue. Most buyers are totally happy and okay to take on a new lease, whether that's a lease or a PPA. But you're right. It is something to acknowledge and at least understand that as far as value goes. I don't expect you to know this, but it was a question that we just got. Is there a better time AC? I mean, is there like, people work from home, is there like a certain window where it's better than another?
It depends on your time of use schedule. Typically during like the middle of the night hours are like the lowest rate, typically, then followed by kind of this mid-morning time, and then that mid-afternoon evening time is the worst time to run it, but that's
when everyone's home
and
using it.
Yeah. So
I know people get upset with SDG&E. It's like, why is it most expensive when I'm home? Well, we're still using them, right?
Yeah.
I still appreciate that. I mean, I needed to hear that too and get reminded by that.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had a client that we out. Can you explain? This is our last question. Thank you so much for your time, Mike. We're at 25 minutes, 5 more minutes left of your time. There are other ways that you can finance solar without using a solar company. You want to talk about the time that you had a client and kind of what we were able to do to help and kind of talk about that?
Yeah, we got to work with a lovely lady by the name of Mary. But it was honestly was perfect for her. It was during that time where everybody's home value was just shooting through the roof, and so she decided to do a cash out refi, and interest rates were dropping down below, like, through the floor. It was like crazy how low they were. And so I was able to send her over to you, and she was able to do a cash buy of the solar. So buying solar cash is going to be the best. Yeah. That's going to be the most bang for your buck. Whether or not, you have an extra, depending on the size of your system, anywhere from 10 to 20,000 bucks, lying around is a different story. But with her, it was like her home equity, skyrocketed. Interest rates were dropping. So she did a cash out refi, took out the money she needed for a new roof and for a solar system, and purchased those two both cash, and then was able to get the tax credit on the full project. So it was
so cool
by her,
so cool,
while being able to lock in that lower interest rate for the mortgage. So
yeah, you explained that so beautifully. Zeus wants to get some FaceTime. Want to come up?
Come on, Zeus. What's up, buddy? Yeah, and it's so smart too with doing that, because it's like you're investing in, to pull out money to invest in equity, back into equity, is genius. It's not like she was buying toys. She was buying stuff that's only going to increase the value of her home and reduce her costs. It was like a lean out, it was cutting her costs, and it was also improving the value of her home. So it was genius.
Everything you said was such a win for her, and interest rates will come down again. But Mike, we were talking about this the other day. It's like, if I have an interest rate that starts with a 3, why am I going to want to refinance to take equity out to pay off a solar loan if my interest rate goes up to 5.5%, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's other options you can look at while we're in a rising rate environment. Now, that won't always be the case. They'll come back down, and maybe it makes sense. Maybe it makes sense to take a higher rate. You can use that equity to pay off solar, pay off bad debts. But you can also flirt with the idea of what's called a home equity line, where basically, Michael, you can leave your interest rate how it is. You don't need to touch that. And then you take out an equity line, which is essentially like a credit card that you take out, which is a much lower interest rate than a credit card, that you can borrow from your home and then use that. And then they could essentially pay for that in cash, right? And get the tax benefit with that. So we were talking about this. Interest rate is important, but what is the bottom line at the end of the day?
Right.
You got some great solar loan companies that have great interest rates, but there's different things on the backside that they're maybe taking away some of that tax credit, that maybe it's okay to take a temporary higher interest rate. And then when interest rates fall, Michael, what they could do is they can consolidate that home equity line through just a normal cash out refinance, like we were able to do with Mary. So, yeah, dude, thanks for your input, Michael. Thanks for being here. Did you have any final thoughts? Sorry, last thing. Kind of tell us about, are you like a broker? Do you work for a company? How do you operate?
Yeah, totally. So I work for a couple different brokerages. So basically what I do is I try to figure out what is it that the homeowner needs, and different brokerages have access to different solar companies, and every solar company has their niche, so if you have a small system, or if you just want to do a cash, or if you have a bigger project and you need more access to it just depends on
depends on the product.
Depends on the product, depends on the person. And so I get to know my customer, understand what it is that they need, try to figure out, okay, this is the best bet for you. If we go with a local company here, this is actually going to save you a lot of money in the long run, and this is going to be great. They have incredible ratings, incredible service. Or, it would actually serve you to go with a bigger company here. They have more reach. especially being in the market that you're in. It's probably best to not use a smaller company, like especially when you're in like say you're in a smaller desert community out in Yuma, or you're out in like you don't want to necessarily use a smaller solar company in those cases, because the chances of them surviving over the course of 25 years is rough. But in a place like San Diego, if you're using a local company in San Diego that's been around for 10 plus years, there's a good chance that that company is actually established themselves and is going to keep moving forward. And so I try to only associate myself with people who I trust. I wouldn't send anybody to anybody that I don't personally trust. And so that's kind of my, and then basically that's all I do. I just facilitate the transaction of, okay, this is probably the best bet for you. This is probably the best way to save good money for you. I would recommend doing this or that financially to make this the most return on your investment. And then I would suggest going with this company. That's like how I do things personally. So,
fiduciary obligation to the client. Michael, it is so cool just to hear all your knowledge, all your wealth. It is so good for someone like me to have a contact like you. I know we've helped a handful of clients get into solar, and just so appreciate you and what you do. I will put Michael's contact info, guys, in our different platforms at the bottom. Michael, is your cell phone typically the best way to reach you? I'll put your cell phone in your email.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. So
awesome. Hey,
honestly,
Mike,
you're the man, dude. Really appreciate you. Love how you serve your people and your clientele, and making sure that they're just educated and giving them just providing them resources. It's like it's cool to see somebody who's looking out for the people and wants to see them succeed and wants to give them the education and the resources available. So appreciate you.
Thanks, man. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in.